because it's good for other people to know what can happen and hopefully prevent it. So by my junior year in college, and this had been building for me for at least 6 years, I was seriously depressed, very alienated, and I was paranoid. I was so paranoid that I stopped talking to people. I would not talk to any students or teachers. I had 1 or 2 friends I still talked to a little bit. I wasn't talking because I was afraid of what they would think of me. I was afraid they could tell. I completely lost my mind. I had stopped going to classes because I hadn't done my homework, and I can imagine, like, I was a good student. I was horrified. I wasn't doing my homework, but I couldn't do it because my brain had stopped working. I couldn't read. I couldn't write a coherent sentence, and pretty soon I couldn't speak coherently at all. And then I started getting lost, even in places that I knew. And finally, the final straw was I started hearing voices. So I was seriously ill. Next slide, please. Fortunately, though, the good news is I had gone to the student counseling center. I knew I wasn't okay. And I was talking to somebody there, and I called him and I'm like, now I'm hearing voices, I'm lost, you know. I recognized something was wrong with me, and he gave me very good advice and said, we actually are 2 hours away from this incredible mental hospital called Harding Hospital. I recommend that you go there immediately, which I did. And it was an incredibly good decision. It's a very scary thing to acknowledge that you need psychiatric help, and it was much more hush-hush 40 years. This is 40 years ago, hard to believe, but it was much more hush-hush then than it is now. But I went there. To make a long story short, I spent 14 months in that hospital. I got all kinds of therapy, mostly therapy, not medication, therapy, one-on-one, in groups, art therapy, dance therapy, exercise, everything. What had happened to me is I had experienced multiple traumas in my young life. And I know there are traumas that some of you have experienced too. I hope nobody had as many as I did. I will just tell you briefly, I had a big load. I had my father leave my mother when I was 9, when we were living abroad. And then that was very hard. We came back to the US. 5 years later, out of the blue, my father just keeled over dead from a heart attack. That was very hard. And then I went into kind of a daze, and a couple months after that, unfortunately, I met somebody, and within a half an hour, he raped me in a parking garage. So that was the last of the major traumas that happened to me when I was at that point 15. But I just went on like normal, continued to go to school, tried to succeed. I did well for a while. I kept doing pretty well for quite a while, actually, but gradually it took its toll, and I became sicker and sicker until that all of it happened. So traumas can cause mental illness, and if you don't address them near the time that they happen and get help and talk through them, eventually they get you. So this is one of the reasons I tell my story. If any of you have even one of those traumas that you are feeling like you need to talk about, don't put it off. There's time in your day for it. You don't want to get this as sick as I did. Next slide. So that was kind of the depths of the talk. It gets better. I'm better. I got better. That place saved me. I went back to college. I finished. I was able to do everything again, just like I had before. My brain worked even better. I then went to graduate school. I then became a professor, and I'm standing here in front of you today telling you that having a mental illness, even one as severe as the one I just described to you, which is nothing minor, in no way will prevent you from living up to your full potential. And I want you to know that if there's anyone who has any doubt about that, look at me. Next slide. So the rest of this talk, what we're going to